During the terrible Australian bushfire season of the summer of 2019 to 2020, I travelled to Kangaroo Island 3 times with the South Australian Country Fire Service as part of a deployment to help the island's CFS brigades fight the fires, which had broken out across a large part of the western end of the island. Kangaroo Island is about 145 kilometres long, and the western end is less densely populated, mostly farmland, pine and blue gum plantations and national parks. The island is accessed by ferry from the mainland, which complicates things. My CFS brigade sent over a team to utilise a truck which was already on the island from the mainland, and we travelled from Kingscote to Pandana, which sits fairly centrally on the island, to where the CFS had set up an operations centre. I don't recall where we went, but we fought a few small grass fires and some tree trunk hollow fires, which was necessary to prevent them from flaring up when the wind changed direction later in the day. These 4 pictures show the aftermath of a fast-running grass fire, which passed through so quickly in fact that the wooden fence posts weren't even scorched. It was a busy but uneventful day, and we returned to the ferry in time to get home to the mainland before dark. One of the pictures shows a fire break cut by a farmer in his grader. The second time I went to the island was with a CFS strike team from the southern Florio region, and we were only supposed to go over for the day, beginning very early and planning to be back on the mainland before dark. We first went to the Pandana Oval, where the CFS had set up a central point for trucks and personnel. We had lunch, and the team leaders were briefed on the situation. We loaded into the trucks and headed out to the west. This first picture shows what we saw as we drove along the South Coast Road towards the western end of KI. It was pretty daunting to see so much heavy smoke. The fire front was about 5 kilometres to the north, which is to the right of the picture, coming our way, and we were seeing spot fires on the south of the road, which is to our left. The second picture shows the convoy as it travels west with the smoke getting darker. The next 3 pictures are of when we stopped, and the strike team leaders discussed the possibility of starting a backburn towards the fire front, as the vegetation was low between us and the scrub to the north. The decision was made not to attempt one, as the wind was gusty and swirling around to quite a degree. One thing a few of us noticed were all the spiders and bugs crossing the road from the direction of the fire, which was still some kilometres away, and we joked that maybe they had a better idea of what was going on than us. This picture is looking back to the east, the direction we had come from, and it became apparent to us that the fire was more extensive than had been thought. I was pretty engrossed with what was going on around me and wasn't really paying much attention to where we were, as I wasn't involved with any of the decision making. I think it was not long after this that we checked on the Western KI caravan park, but apart from some small fires which we put out, there didn't seem to be any immediate threat to it, and we left to head back along South Coast Road, towards the east. We headed back east and came upon a farm which we could see was being threatened from the north by a large fire. So we headed in and checked there was no one there. There were some sheep in an unburnt paddock which bordered the road, so we let them out onto burnt ground where they would be safer. Then moved to the north of the farm to divert the fire around the farm and sheds. We laid a wet line using hoses about 2 metres wide, then did a backburn back towards the fire, which steered this fire around the house and into some scrub to the west. At one point we were fighting the fire, and a large fireball blown by the strong north wind swirled around and over another firefighter and myself. We dropped our hoses and ran for the flashing lights of the truck, as that was about all I could make out. I was so blinded by the smoke and ash and really couldn't see where I was going. But we got about halfway to the truck when we realised that the threat had passed, so we looked at each other, kind of shrugged, and got back to fighting the fire. At about this time, a large gaggle of geese came honking past us from the dam, which was about 100 metres away towards the fire front. We laughed and someone shouted to them, "Fly away, you silly buggers, you've got wings." Eventually the fire was diverted around the farm and sheds, and the decision was made to head out of the farm back onto South Coast Road. As we waited to move off, some guys were occasionally putting out spot fires near the farm, and as we stood on top of the trucks in the crew deck, we saw the fire crowning the trees on the southern side of the road, with the tops of the trees exploding as the fire came towards us against the strong north wind. It was fascinating to watch. Just before this, we got word that a member from another truck had to head back to the ferry to the mainland, leaving only a crew of 3 on that truck. And so, as we had 5, I transferred to that truck to even up the crew numbers. I hadn't met any of these people before, so we chatted amongst ourselves as we prepared to leave the farm. This is the view we were presented with as we left the farm, and the decision was made to turn to the east, as this was back towards the main part of the island. We headed back along South Coast Road, and at some point we were tasked with checking on or rescuing some people at a location about 7 kilometres north on Church Road. We had travelled a short way along this road when the strike team convoy stopped to check with a local CFS member who had joined the strike team earlier in the day as to the best way to get to the location. I took the opportunity to jump out of the truck to take a leak, and whilst I was out of the truck I checked on the engine-driven fire pump to ensure the various valve handles were set correctly in case we needed to use the pump for burnover protection. The pump was set right, as I had expected it to be, but it never hurts to be sure. The convoy moved off, and it very soon became apparent that the fire had broken up and formed multiple fire fronts, and it was impossible to ascertain which was the best direction to go.
Just follow it through. Inman Valley 340, you want to keep up behind us. We're going to go to burnover if we don't go.
As we progressed along Church Road, the fire very quickly came towards us from both the west and east, and the radio traffic between the trucks increased as we realised things were rapidly going pear-shaped. The truck I was in was the last truck in the convoy, tail end Charlie, and our driver kept slowing down to try and avoid the panicked animals, mostly kangaroos, a few of which were burnt, coming out of the scrub to the left and right, bouncing off the truck's bull bar. We were occasionally losing sight of the tail lights and flashing lights of the truck in front of us, as it was getting dark due to the amount of smoke blocking the sun. All of this, though it was about 3 hours until sunset. And we told her that she had to keep her foot down because if we lost sight of the truck in front, we'd be in trouble. Of course, we knew she knew this, but her reaction to avoid hitting the panicked animals was natural. In the end, we only got about 2 kilometres or so along Church Road when it became apparent that we were not going to outrun the fire, and the message came through on the radio that we were heading into a small gravel dump, which had luckily been pointed out by a local CFS member, as we were going to have to go into burnover. Okay, burnover. Every year, any CFS member who intends to go out on a truck is required to complete mandatory burnover training. The great advantage of this training is that, even though I'd only met the people I was in the truck with about an hour or so before, we'd all had the same training and it went like clockwork. Going into burnover consists of radioing in that all members of the truck crew are present, setting the truck's engine to high idle, then switching the air conditioning on, setting the airflow to recirculate, rolling down the thermal window blankets inside the truck, opening the valve which pipes water to the spray bars around the top of the cabin, rolling out the woolen blankets across our laps to help block any stray radiant heat, opening the air valve on an air supply tank inside the cabin which feeds our face masks, and checking on one another. This all took just a minute or two, and it was great to see how well we all worked as a team. We had a container of food with us, and pretty soon we were handing out drinks, salty snacks, lollies and fruit. Burnover training normally allows for 3 minutes of burnover, then getting out of the truck, checking for fires on or around the truck, and radioing in that all crew members were present and safe, and that we were moving off to a safer location. In this instance, we were in burnover for over 20 minutes, and luckily the truck we were in had on-demand air masks, the same as a breathing apparatus set. Some of the older trucks have air hoods and the air doesn't shut off when you take them off. We found that the temperature inside the cabin was increasing and the doors were getting hot. We took the opportunity to peek around the edge of the window thermal blankets occasionally and saw embers and flames blowing around the trucks. Eventually the worst of it had passed and the convoy moved back out onto Church Road and continued north until Baxter's Road, when we turned west, as this was pretty much the only or best way to get to West End Highway, one of the main sealed roads which ring the island. The heat from the surrounding fires was getting quite uncomfortable inside the cabin, and we had to take breaths from our air masks from time to time. Inside the cabin, the plastic trim was getting hot and starting to gas off a little, making the air in the cabin hot and uncomfortable to breathe, and we had to continue to take breaths from our masks. The truck cabin glass was too hot to put the spray bars on, as it was feared they may shatter as the cold weather hit them.
Yeah, we got you ready. Got you ready.
We headed west until we got to West End Highway, where there were some road closed signs across the road, but the first truck pushed them out of the way without stopping, and we headed southwest where we encountered some active flame fronts, which we had no choice but to drive through. I think most of the heat damage to the trucks occurred during this period, mainly from direct flame and radiant heat, as it hurt my eyes to look out of the windows at the burning trees. We passed several burnt structures which I think were farm sheds. I don't think any houses in that area were burnt that day.
It's hard to think it's daylight still.
Yeah.
Kickstart 24P. Welfare check, all crews on board and accounted for. How is your driver going? Over. The Victor strike, hang over. Yeah, human Valley 3 driver is doing well, and give me a thumbs up, over.
You good?
Yeah, I got something.
Roger, execute that please.
I'm Australia Alpha 3-4 driver doing well, over.
Roger that. One more time. Okay, remember the call sign, over. The deputy, Human Valley 3-4.
Just watch out for trees.
Yeah.
A few big ones.
Yeah, approximately how far do you think we are from this safe haven, over? No, 1, 3-4.
Take oxygen. Have we got any glasses or?
I've got my goggles, that's about it.
Okay,
Are they separate?
Now at my drive,
Yeah.
over. To the front, drop your side curtain, just leave the front open. Just keep following up. All good, just keep following up. But drop your curtains on the side so only the driver's front is open. Over. You've got 200 metres to go, over.
Doing well.
Yeah, Rob, keep pushing through. We're doing okay directly behind you, but keep pushing through. Roger, I'm just about through the front.
Doing well, Di.
No, we're
Everyone okay?
Yeah, roger that.
Through the front, but we've still got zero visibility. We're actually in front of the fire now once we get all through. So keep on going, guys. You're doing a fucking good job. Human Valley 3-4, can you give me a call when you're through, over? Yeah, Rob, I'm directly behind your vehicle. Someone else is to the rear, over. Okay, who's dialing Charlie, over?
It's hot here.
I believe it's us, Rob, Alpha 3-4. We've just got through, over.
To the left, it's safe to go around to the left. Victor Strike Team, American River 3-4, you're receiving? Valley Alpha 3-4, can you give us a call when you get past the roadblock sign?
After we were pretty certain we'd cleared the fires, the convoy stopped to check the trucks, as is part of the burnover procedure. When we exited the trucks, we found that the truck I was in had a lot of burning branches and leaves in various places on the back of the truck, between the water tank and the pump, on top of the water tank, and smouldering leaves in amongst the hose reels. We climbed up onto the back of the truck, onto the crew deck to throw the burning branches off, and when we used the hose reels, called sidelines on the trucks, to put out the fires, we found, much to our surprise, that the water in the hose reels was quite hot, as it had been exposed to radiant heat for quite a while. This is something I tell members from both my own and other CFS units to take into consideration during their burnover training. All of the trucks suffered a lot of heat damage. Any plastic external components of the trucks had melted or been burnt. Driving lights, mud flaps, mud guards, indicators. Some decals had peeled away and were blistered. The portable car fridge we had on the crew deck of our truck had a nylon cover which had burnt. The PA communication speaker on the crew deck had melted. One of the other trucks had a burnt mud flap which I was told someone cut off with a pocket knife. I'm unsure which way we headed, as I was not involved in the decisions being made and I'd lost my sense of direction by now, but I think it was east along South Coast Road, and we got to Vivonne Bay. With the light fading and the damage to the trucks, it was decided we'd better head back to Kingscote in the island's northeast corner, about an hour's drive, as we'd missed the last ferry and we needed somewhere to spend the night. I then swapped back to the truck I'd first been with when we got to the farm. All CFS trucks have an electronic water level sensor which indicated the water level in 25% steps, and have an alarm which sounds at the lower 25%, the minimum level allowed for a burnover. We had to drive all the way to Kingscote with the low water level alarm sounding in the cabin as the wire had been burnt through. When we got to Kingscote, someone found the wire and got the alarm beeper to stop. We stopped at a service station and we all got drinks and chips. Soon someone got a large box of baked goods from a local bakery which was still open, and we all headed around to the United Church Kingscote, where we were given mattresses, hot drinks, cakes, biscuits, all sorts of things. It seems the church community had been mobilised to sort out somewhere for us to spend the night. There was a hall to sleep in, but some of us slept out in the open as it was a warm night and we couldn't get much sleep anyway as we were all a bit wound up. In the morning we had coffee and cake and the trucks headed off for the ferry. I don't know about anybody else, but I managed to sleep for a few minutes during the ferry ride back to Cape Jervis. The third time I went to KI was from the 14th to the 17th of January, where I joined the truck and met three great guys. There weren't any exciting events during this deployment, just a lot of hard slog firefighting. We covered a lot of kilometres and I learned a lot from the two older and more experienced guys on my team. We took turns being team leader and I did a lot of driving. One thing I learnt was, don't be the last truck out of a paddock, as the land on KI is quite sandy and often the last truck would struggle to get through the gate. Sometimes the last truck would get bogged and a few times an Army Reserve heavy recovery truck was needed to pull it out. The CFS had a large base set up at the Kingscote Aerodrome and everything was laid on. Catering was done by the Salvation Army and Australian Army Reserve and was very good. A few times we were heading towards a fire and were met by the Army Reserve heading away from it. This actually makes perfect sense as they didn't have the right training or equipment to be in a fire zone. They did a lot of clearing with bulldozers and helped to get bogged trucks out of trouble with their heavy recovery trucks. Each time a shift came back with their trucks, a team of truck mechanics would check every truck and service them if necessary. I believe the truck air filters and pump engine air filters were changed every day, and every truck I saw was damaged to some degree. The sideline hoses on CFS trucks are on a large reel which is equipped with an electric rewind motor, and most of these were damaged that I saw. I know this because most of the trucks I saw had lay flat hoses fitted to the end of the heavy hose reels, with the lay flats looped up and over the hose reels. As we were on night shift, 6 p.m. till 6ish a.m, we were billeted in the theatre of the Community Education Centre, Kingscote campus. We were luckier than most, as I've been told the day shift guys had trouble sleeping at the Kingscote Aerodrome in the portable cabins they'd provided. The night shifts we did were a mix of firefighting with other trucks and patrolling for spot fires and smaller outbreaks. At one point we headed into a paddock south of Coast Road to wait for the fire to come out of the scrub to the south, between us and the sea. It didn't seem to be moving towards us, so as I was in charge I decided to move into the scrub to investigate. We drove only 100 metres or so into the scrub before I realised that the track was narrowing and the ground was very sandy, so I took the decision to turn around while there was still room to do so. After this I radioed for advice as to whether to wait or move on to somewhere else, and was told that there wasn't much happening and we could wait to see what the fire did. So, as we were all very tired, we took turns sleeping or watching the fire. It never got any closer to us, and we headed back onto South Coast Road to patrol for fires. We found that patrolling for small fires and smouldering stumps was complicated by having red and blue flashing lights, and I decided to turn them off every time we thought we'd see something. This saved a lot of hose dragging and walking out into the dark for no reason, as we got a lot of reflections from soft drink cans and other shiny items. When we got back to the mainland, I was left with a real feeling of connection to the island, and I've been back since to see how things look. I was astounded when we found the spot where our strike team had gone into burnover. It was a small gravel dump surrounded on all sides by blue gum plantations. It was almost a miracle that the local CFS member knew of it. All in all, it was a great experience, and despite the dramas, I wouldn't have missed it. Some thrills and a lot of learning. The people I've fought fires alongside in the CFS are a great bunch, very committed and very professional. One upshot of my trips to KI are when I'm faced with a small fire event, I think of how big the fires were on KI and it puts things into perspective.